despite the projections and everything that we know about this Georgia football team heading into the 2023 season, I do still think that there are plenty of question marks that will likely get answered early on and at the beginning of September. I think we're going to find these out. I think there are questions about the defense. I think there are fewer questions about the offense. And I've been on record of telling you guys how I feel about Georgia's offense, that I think that has a lot of potential. And I think that there are just a ton of really good players across the board that are going to make it easy for Georgia to put up 40 points per game. Maybe it's a little bit tougher because of the schedule and all of that. But one of my biggest questions, and I think is a lot of people's biggest question, is does Georgia have a superstar on offense? Do they have someone that's going to replace Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey? Lad McConkey wasn't really a true superstar, at least not by the definition, but he definitely had certain games where he played like that. You think about the Ole Miss game. You think about Mississippi State in 2022. I think about Oregon, how well he played in 2022. Had a really good game against Missouri. There were moments where Lad McConkey could be that, and Brock Bowers certainly was an offensive superstar for Georgia over the past 3 seasons. Well, do they have a weapon like that? Or is it the fact that Carson Beck is this projected Heisman winner, maybe projected number 1 overall pick, all of that, best quarterback in college football? Maybe is he the superstar? I want to look at it from a different perspective and talk about it from a weapons point, because I think we know that Carson Beck, we know what he is. He's good. He's going to have a good completion percentage. He's going to be able to put up yards. Is he going to throw a gazillion touchdowns? I don't know. That will depend on what Georgia does. I don't know that he's going to throw 40 touchdowns just because of the way Georgia plays offense. But is there a guy that's going to just put them over the edge? You think about Trevor Etienne. Does he have that potential? I think that it's certainly there with him. You think about, does one of the tight ends step up in replacement of Bowers and they take over? Or is it a receiver? And at this point in time, the most likely one has seemed like it would be Dominic Lovett, right? This would be year 2 for him at Georgia. This would be, and he's essentially going to take over Lad McConkey's spot, right? I think at least you're going to see him move around. You saw that at G-Day. So is there a true superstar on this team? Now, the answer could be no. The answer could be no. It also depends on what your definition of a superstar is. Is it just stats? Is it eye test? What are the actual tangible things that you can use to talk about that? So there are different pieces to this conversation, but I think, it's kind of obvious, right? Like, by Georgia standards, who have been superstars on offense in recent years? Obviously Bowers. I think Stetson has had definitely his superstar moments over the last couple of years. I think that, obviously Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, guys like that, a lot of the RBU members, DeAndre Swift had superstardom. I think that Pickens could have been, but wasn't quite there, but had shades of it and had potential to reach that level of status for Georgia. Ultimately, I'm not 100% sure if there is one on this Georgia team. And that might not be a bad thing. It doesn't mean that Georgia's not going to win the whole thing. It doesn't mean that Georgia's going to, lose, 2, 3, 4 games this coming season. I just don't see that happening with how talented this roster is, with how good of a coach that Kirby Smart is. I just have a hard time seeing Georgia lose that many games. I have a hard time seeing them not making a deep college football playoff run in the initial 12. So let's talk a little bit about the 2 guys that I lean towards, outside of Carson Beck, and we can talk about Carson in itself. But talking about Dominic Lovett and Trevor Etienne, those are kind of the 2 guys that I've honed in on as if there is going to be someone that really pops off for Georgia this year, really steps up in a statistical way, in a moment's way. I think it could be one of those 2 guys that makes a huge impact. The next layer of it, is Carson Beck just that good to where he is the superstar? And because of how good Carson Beck is, everything around is just really, really easy. I do think that maybe that's just the case. Maybe a lot of us are looking at it in a poor way and just not acknowledging that Beck is going to be that good. I think that there's a little bit of a difference with Beck than there are in other highly projected quarterbacks in college football. I want to talk about that because I think that as good as he is, I think superstar might not be the exact word, and he might make me eat my words and really, really show off some stuff this year. And I do expect an improvement from Carson, and I think that is scary from for other teams. But I think that from a weapon standpoint, is there going to be that guy? Is it going to be one of the two guys that I'm planning on talking about here for the next few minutes? Ryan Curley from Dawg Post, asking you to sign up for the newsletter with the link down below in the description of this video. Make sure you're checking out. I got an Eco Poly shirt on, repping the brand. Make sure you're checking out Red Zone, giving a little shout out to some of our sponsors. It's going to be some good stuff coming up in the next couple of months, even though it is still the off season. I don't really think there's a true off season in college football for these guys, right? You get a little bit of a break in the summer, you get some breaks here and there, but it's 24/7 for Kirby Smart, and they've got workouts throughout the summer, they've got spring. I think Dominic Love impressed this spring, and this spring is the main reason why the attention is on him from me, for other media members, for the fans to step up. You get over 100 yards of GA, you get that touchdown, you do it the way you do it and have a really impressive touchdown like that, you look like you can be a security blanket, and that's a very important thing. When a play breaks down, or even just on a player's first read, chemistry matters a lot. Obviously, really, really good quarterbacks are always going to make or most of the time going to make the correct reads, really scan the field, but chemistry matters a lot when things break down. And Carson Beck and Brock Bowers had chemistry. Brock Bowers is also a superstar football player, and I think the same goes for Ladd McConkey. But in those moments, in those third down moments, that's who they looked for. They looked for those guys. Marcus Osby-Jackson was kind of the third one in that mix of guys, hey, we need a big player right now. Let's go to you. It seems like Dominic Lovett is most likely going to take over that role based off the commentary in the offseason from Kirby Smart and based off what we saw at GA and what we heard. But Kirby talked about it. He said, if there's a guy, and sometimes I'm surprised because he usually just doesn't praise guys like this all the time, and he's always wanting people to get fired up and want to be motivated to get better. But he talked about just how there were days during the spring where Dominic Lovett was dominating. And when you're dominating in a Georgia practice, when there are just a ton of guys, your level, at the highest level of college football, 4 or 5 star guys that are future NFL players, if you're dominating guys like that, then you're really good. Kirby did, kind of sit on that a little bit and then bring up the fact, well, maybe it's because Javon Bullard and Kamari Lassiter aren't around there this time to guard him, right? Future NFL high draft picks in the second and third round. So there is that element to it. With Lovett, he's been around the SEC for a few years now. I think that his connection with Carson, to me, was apparent early on in 2023. I thought that he already kind of was a little bit of a security blanket. And you see he ends up with over 500 yards and a lot of catches for Georgia. And I think that those numbers are only going to increase, right? And smaller wide receivers can be superstars. We've seen it with Devontae Smith. I'm not calling Dominic Lovett Devontae Smith. I know that they have, they're smaller, skinnier guys and wear the same number. But you can see that smaller guys like that, even Ladd McConkey, he, probably bigger than people realize, but can make a huge impact on this team. I think if it's a receiver or a tight end, that's your most likely guy. And then my dark horse for that would just be Dylan Bell, if that even is a dark horse. And Colby Young will probably make more of an impact than people realize. From the running back standpoint, is it Trevor Etienne? I think that the offensive line, to my untrained eyes, if they are untrained, has just looked better when they're in pass protection. It just looks like better things happen. Now, you saw as the year went on, Georgia ran the ball better and better as the year went on in 2024. Well, this time they've got a guy that I think is a step above the running backs that they've had last year. And you got an offensive line that should be really, really good again with the threat of Carson Beck. And the fact that Trevor Etienne can catch out of the backfield is something that could add to his superstardom. But if he's a guy with, 1,200 plus scrimmage yards, 15-ish touchdowns, which, then you kind of start to reach, well, that was not just an important player, but that was a star for Georgia. I think that those numbers are realistic for Trevor Etienne. I don't know that there is a true superstar on this team other than Carson. Because I think he's going to put up 4,000 yards, 30-ish touchdowns. Just really, really, really good play from Carson is kind of what I'm expecting. Maybe it's not elite. Can it be the level that Mac Jones did it? Because I think that you kind of look at the way they all play quarterback. Is that more of what he's capable of from a Heisman kind of season? Well, Mac Jones put up 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. That was superstar level. Had a lot of superstars around him. Carson will not have as good of players around him. So if he can do the same thing, yeah, it is a little bit more on Carson than maybe I'm going to give him credit for. Thanks for watching.